Gathers for the win. Count it. It's over.
Hi, my name is Dr. Joaquin Wallace. I'm the founder of Project Transition, and welcome to our interview series where we interview former high-performing athletes. And today we have Mr. Jordan Gathers, who I call JG5. Jordan, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Dr. Wallace. Honored to be here today.
Well, Jordan, I mean, you've had a great career in terms of college basketball. Now you're doing some great things as well, a post-college athlete. Just kind of give us a background from high school to college and where you're at today.
Absolutely. So Jordan Gathers, again, a product of Los Angeles, California, growing up in a family of a single mother who worked hard and struggled to provide for me and my younger sisters. I would say that my path to where I am today in South Bend, Indiana, it's a bit unconventional. But I would say that my path here today has really cultivated my resolve and my story. I think, I had the dream of becoming a professional basketball player, just like any other kid growing up in the inner city, consume my day-to-day thoughts. I put in, hours and hours of hard work to be able to achieve that goal, and I made a promise to my mother that I would play at the next level and play professionally. And so I was committed to that and wanted to achieve that dream and fulfill that promise. But, life has its ups and downs. And so that hard work kind of led me into, being regarded as one of the top high school players in the state of California. If I recall correctly, I believe I was the number 3 rated point guard in the state, top 100, top 150, according to ESPN. Played against some of the NBA caliber players like Kyrie Irving, Klay Thompson, James Harden, Brandon Jennings, Spencer Dinwiddie, DeLon Wright, Russell Westbrook. That's just to name a few. But, it felt like the NBA was close and near, as a lot of those guys are playing in the NBA now. And I was right on par with either being just as ranked as them or higher. And so, going through high school, I decided to take my talents to Western New York, St. Bonaventure University, a private school, about 2,500 students. Leaving LA to go to the frozen tundra was a big experience for me, a big different change. And so, like any other Division I player, again, I still had that dream and that goal of being a professional basketball player in the NBA. And so my freshman year, I had a lot of challenges. I had a lot of adjustments to make. From my freshman year, having to readjust to the academic level of a private institution, being able to readjust to the workouts, the scheduling, all of that it wasn't new, but it was at a whole nother level that I wasn't accustomed to growing up. So my freshman year had a lot of success. We actually won the first ever Atlantic 10 championship in the school's history. Being able to play as a freshman was rewarding for me, on the big stage, being able to win that, to get a ring, and then to be able to play in the NCAA March Madness tournament was truly amazing and success. And so going on after that, I felt like I was one step closer to making it to the NBA. And then, sophomore year, we didn't have as much success as our freshman year, as we lost a lot of seniors. I built upon my freshman year. Junior season is when my whole career kind of took a shift and change, as I was injured in a preseason game, had a misdiagnosed groin injury that sidelined me for a couple games, as the correct diagnosis of that injury was a hip labrum tear and impingement that, of course, didn't come later until after the season. And so I played the entire season, sitting out those couple of games, and had to have surgery after that season, which had to repair that tear in my labrum, fix the impingement. And that took about 6 to 8 months. And so during that time, I'm asking myself, what does that look like for my career? What does that look like for reaching my dream, reaching my goal? And so, I didn't have the answers at the time, but I knew that I had to get healthy. I knew that this surgery was the only way for me to get back to some sort of health, as, I was playing through pain, thinking that was my only option. Yeah, I remember, telling myself after having the surgery on June 27, 2014, countless times, will I ever play basketball again? I didn't know the extent of that injury. I knew that if I didn't have the surgery, it wouldn't be back in the proper state. And so that scared me. It scared me because, one, I made a promise to my mother. I felt as though that this injury was going to hinder me from that. So as I began to heal, I began to go through physical therapy. I had an opportunity to rehab at Curlin and Joe in Los Angeles with Magic Johnson, Kobe Bryant, Candace Parker, a lot of other pro athletes. So I was able to get a perspective on, having injuries and being able to bounce back, which was really a God moment for me, because I asked, will I ever play basketball again? And then now here I am sitting next to pro athletes every week, rehabbing from my injury. And so as I began to, glean their experiences and their advice, I started to get flexibility back, started to walk and run, jump again without pain. And so I started to get a little bit of hope. But through that, I wanted to share that even though I had that injury, I had an unforgettable moment in Brooklyn, New York, in the Nets arena, the Barclays, where I hit a game-winning shot to beat the number one team in the Atlantic 10 that year. And so I remember hitting that shot and it being number one on Sports Center, which was every kid's dream, hitting that game-winning shot in a big-time game, nationally televised, tweeted everywhere. Didn't have TikTok wasn't as famous back then, but being able to reflect on that lesson and the hard work and the hours that I put in, it was amazing to be able to accomplish that, even though I had those dark times. And so with that, graduated in 3 years with a BA in journalism and mass communication. During that time, I received an outstanding education, secured an Atlantic 10 championship, and I was able to compete in, again, March Madness. And so after my full recovery, I decided to take the next step and transfer. And so this was kind of right before the boom of the transfer portal or NIL deals. So with me graduating and earning my degree, I was able to play right away at the next university. And that university that I decided to choose was Butler, the Butler Bulldogs. And so I pursued my master's degree there and felt as though that was a perfect fit for me to run parallel tracks with, again, achieving my goal of playing in the NBA and going into the Big East Conference, which had a lot of NBA prospects, a lot of NBA level schedules. Scouts were heavily attended at these games, and to be able to go out my last year with a bang. So finishing my college experience and career at Butler, it was a life-defining decision for me. And though I didn't get drafted or I didn't go overseas, deciding not to do that, I'm happy to call Indiana home, because going to Butler was what has brought me to today. So, after college, after basketball, earning an undergrad and BA in journalism, mass communication, earning my MBA, I had the privilege of working alongside the CEO, Dennis Murphy, and Dr. Ryan Nagy, the president of Indiana University Academic Health Center. And that was eye-opening for me, because the healthcare industry is very complex. And so, it was one where I was very interested in, because I was very depressed at the time, because I had done something my whole life of playing basketball, dribbling this ball since I was a little boy, to going into the workforce for the first time in my life. For me, basketball was my job, but being able to work in the healthcare sector, it was one that I can't thank Dennis Murphy and Dr. Ryan Nagy for that opportunity, because it helped supported me in my career now. So working through that transition of my adult life, I was able to navigate a lot of different aspects. Self-awareness, for one, being able to look into myself, look in the mirror and say, what am I really doing in my life? Asking God, what's your plan for me? What's your purpose for me? And so I came to Indianapolis, went to Butler thinking I was going there to help myself and put myself in a better position to make the NBA. But I gained so much more than just school, so much more than basketball. It was more in the process of the game of life. And so with that, I was able to work in the healthcare sector for a number of years, was able to be a part of many networking opportunities that some never even have the opportunity to have. So I'm grateful for that. I made some lifelong friendships and relationships in the political realm, and attended many events, galas, networking opportunities, with some pretty important folks, not only just in Indiana, but in Washington, D.C. So a former presidential candidate, Pete Buttigieg, former U.S. Senator Joe Donnelly, Indianapolis Mayor Joe Hogsett, currently federal judge Jane Magnus Stinson, Governor Eric Holcomb of the state of Indiana, Senator Cory Booker, Vice President, now President Joe Biden, and being able to visit the White House on multiple occasions with First Lady Michelle Obama and President Barack Obama. So I always love that quote of preparation meets opportunity, but wonder what happens when you prepare and the opportunity isn't there. And so I had put all this time into basketball, and then going into healthcare, going into these realms and spaces of the political landscape of an area that I had no information or knowledge of, but I used the lessons that basketball taught me in that time to be able to put myself in a good situation, present myself in a good light. And so from that, the thing that I knew from the beginning, and it was one from my mother that taught me that basketball is short-lived, that the ball is going to stop bouncing eventually. And so for me, I knew knew that I wanted to become an influential voice for many people that might not have had a voice. And so being able to go through life and go through healthcare, go through the transition, life after basketball, I was presented an opportunity to come up here to South Bend, Indiana, and work in the city, work alongside Mayor James Mueller as his right-hand guy. And it was one that I was excited about because now I'm able to go from one of the top healthcare providers in the state and then be able to work in a mid-sized city and help those who are in an underserved community, help those that might be voiceless or might not feel like they have an opportunity to make real change. I took that role of his deputy chief of staff in 2020, right before the pandemic. It was one where I thought I was leaving the healthcare sector, and then we get hit with, a global pandemic. And so I was, grateful for the opportunity because now I was stepping into a role where I was able to really engage and really tap into the people, tap into a community that welcomed me with open arms. And quite frankly, I was the first African-American, first Black male in that position in the history of the city. So representation matters. I didn't take that lightly. It was one that I knew going into the role, but I didn't know the magnitude of my presence and being able to inspire the next generation of leaders and to be able to, bring hope, instill hope into a community that didn't feel that they were being valued or seen. So with that, with a thing that I kind of wrote in my last year in college, and the thesis paper was, we are all bigger than what we do and the talent we possess. When life takes something away that we love, we must dig deeper and define ourselves. Our character will be revealed by our decision to either give up or persevere and become great at something new. So my path to Indiana, as I mentioned earlier, it may not be conventional, but all the things that I've gone through in my life has brought me to this new beginning.
So let me ask you this question. So, that's a lot to unpack. You kind of explained from the beginning to the end, which is important. One thing I want to touch on is you mentioned the fact that you were depressed at one point, within the African-American community, well, within marginalized communities anyway. We don't talk about that. So looking back today, how did you deal with the mental health side of it? And you really didn't know what it was, right? But how did you deal with that? Did you communicate with someone? Was it internally? What did you do to help navigate through your own mental health struggles that you were having? Because, again, you go from one point where you're a high-performing athlete, then you get injured, and then from the injury, then you're trying to figure out what you're going to do next. And then, you've had all these trials and tribulations. What did you do?
That's a great question. I would say back then and even now, I didn't do anything. For me, it was my support system. It was God. I'm a man of faith. So I think back on it. And the more that I think back on it, again, I want to give credit and credence to my mom, because without her guidance and without her love and support, she would always tell me that you're God's greatest miracle. And so God has a plan for you. And so no matter how good I was or how good I thought I was, the ball was going to stop bouncing one day. So even though the goal was the NBA, at the end of the day, I wanted to make sure, and my mother wanted me to make sure that to get that education, because that's going to last a lifetime. Basketball, your body's going to deteriorate. It's going to slow down at some point in time. And so for me at that time, I didn't think about it in the moment. It was more so I knew that I had to, get the surgery. For one, I had to think about that it was misdiagnosed at the beginning and realize that, I have to do this. This is not it was something that I knew that I had to do. And so for me, it didn't really cross my mind. And even today, I think about it. Would I have done anything different? Probably not. I probably would have continued to pray, would have continued to lean on my supporting cast and my family, and just to get better in that moment.
What mental health resources do you wish you had to cope with the mental distress during your athletic career and transition from athletics?
Therapy. I wish therapy was really highlighted during my experience, and not just for my experience, but for student athletes as a whole. I think that would be a key resource for any athlete, for any person, honestly. But I think your therapy should be more highlighted. It should be considered cool, because we are dealing with a lot of traumas that we keep down and we don't express.
So Jordan, I recall, when I left playing college athletics, and it's interesting because, we all believe that at one point we're going to be able to play professionally. That's the goal. And I think a lot of people don't understand the sacrifices and the dedication that you put into it to try to get to the next level, the professional level. Because as you go through high school, it's all about attrition. You start in elementary school, you start with a bunch of guys, and then you get to junior high school, that dwindles down. Then you get to high school, then that dwindles down. Then you get to college, you're probably one or two or three that actually do make it. And then if you get a chance to get to the next level, you're really one of the top 1%. I mean, you mentioned all the athletes you played against, all of those who are currently playing in the NBA today. I'm watching Kyrie Irving as well. But at the same time, when you said it's over, mentally, how much did that put on you just to say it is over?
That's a great question. It was a lot. And I will say here that I was in a deep, dark place. I was depressed. I can say that now. I think at the time, I was fighting the truth. I was running away from it because even though I made that decision to not pursue professional basketball, whether it be in the G League, whether it be overseas, which I had plenty of offers, to turn those down, it was rough. But at the end of the day, again, I go back to my faith in God. I didn't really worry about it too much because I knew that I was making the right decision. I prayed on it. I asked my family, and I knew God had me in that moment.
So let's talk about mentorship. I know that mentorship is an important piece in this whole process. Oftentimes, we're being mentored by those and we don't know that we are being mentored. We have to be willing to accept the mentorship as well. You mentioned that your mother was your mother, but she was also your mentor as well. Outside of your mom, though, who were those mentors that you look to, that kind of help move you along? I know you mentioned a few of them, but if you had to identify one or two, which one of those two mentors really helped you to get to this point in your life today?
So I would say for sure in high school, Mark Jackson, great NBA player, phenomenal father, man of God. He was instrumental in my decision as well. As far as very supportive too, and me, getting to St. Bonaventure as well. So he was instrumental. Me and his son, we were best friends. We grew up together. And so he helped me realize that I have a legacy of my own. And, early on in my life too, dealing with my uncle, Hank Gathers, who was a prominent college basketball star. One that he left a legacy of greatness, being able to change the game of basketball through Coach Westhead and his teammates at LMU, averaging hundreds of points a game and, leading the NCAA in scoring and rebounding. So I had to deal with that aspect of it too. Family and my uncle on my father's side, who I never met. That was something that I always had to, question, or always had to be, are you going to be as good as him? Or are you going to carry on that legacy? And had to realize that I'm honored to carry the last name Gathers, but at the end of the day, that there's only one Jordan Gathers. And so Mark Jackson for sure. I would say also two others that I would be remiss to not mention is, Chris LaPlaca at ESPN. He's an alumni of St. Bonaventure. He was phenomenal and being a mentor to me over the 3 years that I spent in Western New York, as I had dreams of becoming a professional commentator after my NBA career. And so to be able to connect with him, who worked at ESPN, he was the senior vice president of comms for many years, for several decades there. And then also Adrian Wojnarowski, a prominent NBA writer, analyst, great friend of mine as well. So I had some really influential and great mentors growing up, and that's through the game of basketball and through my education.
So, you mentioned the relationship you have with you and your dad. I know we talked about that several times, basically to let people know that I've been knowing you for quite some time, right? To be transparent. Correct me, did I give you the name JG5? Did I give you JG5 or did you come up with that? I can't remember that.
You did give me the name JG5. Yes.
So Jordan, you're a mentor now to your kids. Now you're a mentor to two boys. How are you taking that on?
I take it on day by day, and it's certainly not easy, but I love it. I'm dedicated. I'm committed to it. And it's one that, for both of my sons, I'm very excited to be a role model for them, but also be that inspiration and that supporting figure for them as well, whatever they want to do. For them to be the ages of 9 and 1 years old, they still have a lot of life ahead of them, but they also have to understand that life is going to go quickly, and the decisions that you make in life are very important. If I didn't make the decisions that I made, I wouldn't be in the position I am today as far as being an executive in the city of South Bend and being able to meet so many influential people along my journey. So it's an honor. I thank God to be able to be a father and to be able to help guide my sons in their plan and what they want to do in this world.
So Jordan, what were the biggest post-transition challenges that you faced? So we're speaking of when you left the game that has allowed you and has transitioned that you can take that from sports and transition it to your everyday life.
That's a great question. I think for me is everybody wants to know the story behind the story. A lot of times, with college athletes, student athletes, I should say, people see the gear, the swag, the hotels, the flights, the televised games, but no one sees the denial, the hatred, the criticism, harsh criticism of a student athlete. So for me, I believe that taking all of those things, putting them together, all of those experiences, and allowing me to grow and stay strong without viewing it as a loss. I think a lot of times you could really be in a bad place in your life when you look at the negative. So for me, I never underestimated the power of positivity. I'm grateful for every denial. I'm grateful for every hater, every doubter, naysayer, because that has led me to every win that I've had in my life today. And basketball teaches many lessons. It also taught me that you have to look at the next play. You don't lose or win on one play in basketball. There's many possessions. So that's what I was able to take from the game of basketball and translate it to my everyday life.
So March 2014, what is so important about that day?
That's the big day, the big moment of the game-winning shot. The Bonaventure stunner, JG5, shocks the world.
So the reason why I asked you that is because that's something that is embedded, you'll never forget. Right after that, you guys lost, was not able to advance on in that tournament. So now we're talking about the highs and lows. Talk to me about that in terms of the mental health that goes into that.
Absolutely. I will say that day, I'll never forget it. It was one that is etched in the history of St. Bonaventure, etched in the history of college tournament play. For me, to be number one on ESPN, I remember days as a kid growing up in my bedroom, playing on my little court on my door, counting down. So to have that moment was a God moment for me because, again, I was injured that season. So technically, I wasn't supposed to have that shot. I wasn't supposed to have that moment, but I decided to play through my injury, and I was afforded an opportunity by God himself to put me in that situation and to be successful in hitting that shot and beating the top-ranked team in that tournament. And so for us to go on that high and then the next game we lose, it was detrimental because we felt like we had all the pieces. We felt like we had the momentum to take us to that championship game, but we didn't get there. But I will say that, again, it was another opportunity that I viewed as positive because, again, those losses weren't really losses. The outlook that I had on it, that they were lessons for me that I could take on into my career or into my life.
Jordan, I always say that sports is the windows of life. How you interact in regards to sports practice games is how you interact in life. With that being said, you talk about the highs and lows, the tribulations, if you will. How has sports shaped you today?
I would say that sports have shaped me in not being afraid, being able to make a play. I would say that there's so many different aspects of sports, from being the best player in the country, being the best player in the state, playing against the top players, and then going into college and maybe not starting, maybe sitting on the bench. That bench is a true teacher, if you will, from starting to not starting to facing all these new challenges. And for me, the game of basketball has taught me and shaped me in a way of not playing it safe, going for what you want in life, being not necessarily, reckless, but being strategic in your journey. And so I like to don myself, yes, JG5 first because you gave me the name, but also Jordan Gathers, the journeyman, who's willing to take new challenges and to live his life differently than those that have come before me and those that will come after me.
Let's briefly just kind of talk about your Uncle Hank. I recall watching the game when it actually happened. It's interesting is years later, then I meet you, right? It's funny how life works out. When I met you, immediately I thought about that night watching the game. Didn't bring it up because, you just don't know how someone will react in regards to that. But now, you're older, you have kids. Obviously, people will always connect you to Hank Gathers. How do you handle that now when people ask you those questions or say, oh, wow, Hank Gathers, you're his nephew. How do you handle that today?
I believe I handle it very well. My mother did a great job in letting me know who my uncle was. giving me the history of my family. I had opportunities with my father to talk through it. It was a struggle. I believe it's still a struggle for my father to this day, to lose his best friend, to lose his brother, and so for me, it's not as difficult because I never had a chance to meet him. It's funny because I was born 657 days after he passed. So I had a reporter tell me that. So that'll always be etched in my mind of 657 days. And so I was like, I need to figure out how to market that. But it is cool to be able to carry the name, as I mentioned earlier, because the legacy he left. And for him, for everyone that I've talked to, everyone that knew him had a positive thing to say. It was nothing never negative. He left smiles. He left impact on the lives of so many people. And so to be, 30 plus years later, and his name is still being brought up every year, before March Madness or during the college season, is a testament to his hard work and to the things that he did in his life. And so for me, that's what I'm going to do and going to continue to do for my life, to leave my legacy and leave my mark on this world.
So we talked about you being a mentor to your two sons, but also you're a mentor to your two sisters as well. Talk about the relationship you have with your two sisters.
Yeah, no, my two sisters, they are a ball of fun. I think that's where I get my personality from. They're dancers, they're very intelligent. And so for me, growing up being the big brother, I've always been the protector and always been, the enforcer in a sense, because we share something in common that we didn't have our fathers growing up. So I never wanted to take the place of being their father, but always wanted to let them know that, again, I love you and that I'm here for you, through good and bad. So the relationship with my sisters is one that it's going to last a lifetime. Even when I'm long and gone, I'm going to always be their big brother, and that's something I'm proud of.
So why don't you let our listeners know exactly what you're doing today and the purpose of your mission?
Yeah, so today I'm the executive director of the East Parks and Arts for the city of South Bend. Again, the administration led by James Mueller, the 33rd mayor of South Bend. This is an appointed position that allows me to manage and maintain 56 parks, city parks here in South Bend, Indiana, community centers, event venues, recreational facilities. And so, we partner with many organizations. We have a baseball team, a professional baseball team here, the South Bend Cubs. We have a world-renowned zoo, Potawatomi Zoo, that gets well over 400,000 visitors a year. And so to be able to be in this position, I have a phenomenal team of 200 employees full-time, and then added on part-time and seasonal is another 200 on top of that. So this role is one that I look forward to because this department is the heart and soul of our city, and to be able to have a more connected culture, a more connected community. And so I love everything I'm doing each and every day because it's energizing, it's fun, it's not the same, it's not methodical. So the people love it because we do so many events, we host so many tournaments and games. And I would say that my life in basketball has really taught me the lessons to put me into a great position to be leading this team here in South Bend.
I believe you mentioned that you were coaching too. Is that correct?
That is correct. Yes.
Okay. So now as coach gathers, how is that? Because now you're coaching these young kids, which you were at one point. Now you're coaching these young men who eventually can be someone like yourself. How do you interact with them? How do you coach this new generation of student athletes?
It's a great question. And I would say that this generation is very different from when I grew up. For me, it's great. It's a great perspective, to gain something new from these kids and these teenagers, because I remember when I too was a teenager not too long ago. But again, I'm able to share my story. For me, is I let the kids know, these student athletes like myself, that I don't know all the solutions to all the problems, but I know my story, and I want them to know their story as well. And so for me, it's just being able to share my experiences, to share the things that didn't go so well and things that did go well, help navigate their journey and help, them kind of overcome some of the obstacles that they might face or that they are facing in their lives. And so my coaching style is really focused on building relationships and, again, embracing the challenges and the lessons, and not really focusing on the negatives and the losses, because that's what builds you and makes you a great person. at the end of the day. It's not about bouncing the ball. It's not about how well you shoot. Those are great. But what are they going to be saying about you when that ball stops bouncing? How are you going to translate the game of life, the game of basketball to that next step, that next journey? That's really how I mentor and how I speak and connect with the kids today.
So final question for you. So Jordan Gathers today. Jordan Gathers has an opportunity to speak to a younger Jordan Gathers. What would Jordan Gathers today say to the younger Jordan Gathers?
That's a great question. I would tell the younger Jordan Gathers, or the self-proclaimed nickname JG5, continue to dream big. Don't be afraid to make mistakes. Don't be afraid to, make decisions. Be yourself, be confident, and to continue to grow as every day is, you're winning and learning that God has you no matter what. That's what I would share with myself, that God has you no matter what. And the years from now that, all those things that you worried about are not a concern.
I'd like to thank Jordan Gathers for taking time out of his busy schedule to join us on Project Transition as we interview former athletes, high-performing athletes, get their perspective on mental health as well as mentorship. Again, we'd like to thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule, JG5. Any final words you want to say before we say goodbye?
Yes, my final words is I always ask the question to anyone I'm talking to or anyone I'm dealing with is, do you want to win? Sometimes, that answer is yes. Most of the time is yes. Then I always ask them, what is the past tense of win? And then they say won. And then I tell them to spell it backwards. And that's N-O-W, now. So, I think a lot of times, we get caught up in the present, we get caught up in the past, but thinking about we can't figure out what the future is going to hold, but we can certainly win now. So that would be my last words is, let's win now, let's win together. Appreciate all of the questions that you had today. This is an honor.
Again, thanks, Jordan Gathers. Again, win now. I'm going to use that. But again, on behalf of Project Transition, we'd like to thank you for coming on, allowing yourself to be vulnerable on this stage again, because it does allow listeners to say, hey, he looks like me, he talks like me, he is me. And it provides a pathway of mentorship and to speak about those topics that we don't like to talk about, which is mental health. So again, thank you and take care in your future. And we will definitely be hearing from you.
Absolutely.